Hello, folks. Today we have Uncle Joel on the second edition of the Persson podcast, whatever it's called. Can't remember. I got to interview him right before he had breakfast with his family, so there's probably some noises in there. As usual, hopefully you enjoy this. If you have questions or people I should interview next, please let me know in the comments or just text me. Usually I like to read a poem ahead of time, kind of before it starts, or a quote, but I totally forgot. So we're just going to have to go into it, and I hope you enjoy it. Cheek. All right, so you can't see me. You can only see, this looks like an interrogation scene.
Why don't you get in the picture too?
Yeah, maybe I can do it like this.
Yeah. Are you in?
Yeah, so this is Uncle Joel. We did a first episode with Uncle Phil, and that went good. But we had some comments on the accuracy of questions. So basically, hopefully we can spend some time and get to know Uncle Joel better and correct some things that Uncle Phil said.
Or at least give another viewpoint.
Another viewpoint, because as we know, like, Uncle Joel's truth is his truth, and our truth is our truth. So,
well, the thing about our family is we always said there are two families that we have, and the memory of what happened is vastly different between the earlier children and the later children.
Well, that's, I think, true with ours. So, the first question is, Grandpa. What do you know about Grandpa's upbringing?
Yeah.
That's where we'll start and work from Grandpa to Grandma, and then to the family. So,
well, I was fairly open about his upbringing. I think the key thing was that his dad died pretty early in the whole thing. From my understanding, it was around when he was 12 or so. But that's very vague with that regard to that. And then, of course, he was an identical twin, so he and his brother Ray were very much in cahoots with each other. And I think they always had a little bit of rivalry with the older brother, which was an Uncle Arnold. And then there was Bee, who was the sister, and she was older. And I think she was kind of indulgent on them and helped them out.
So he wasn't from a big family?
It wasn't a big family, no. It was just those four, so...
And then, so here was the big controversy, was whether or not, I asked if Grandpa was in the Navy, because that's what I understood.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be the accurate.
Yeah, and of course I reserve the right to be wrong, but from the earliest time, I understood he was in the Coast Guard, and that Uncle Ray was in the Merchant Marine. And actually, Uncle Ray was in for a lot longer than my dad, because my dad suffered basically a nervous breakdown, and that's what his brother Ray said anyway. And my dad, though, thought his story was that he had a problem with his what do you call it? I can't even remember.
Lymph nodes, or
not lymph nodes, the thyroid.
Oh.
And so once he got that together, he found some health food or something, then he was good to go. But
how did they get involved in, like, Merchant Marines and Coast Guard if they were from Chicago?
Yeah, I think it really had to do with the war. The fact that at that time it was something you basically got into. I don't know if he was drafted. I don't have a sense of that, but that would have been, let's see, he was 18. Yeah, it's right around when the war was. So I'm sure there was pressure, at least, if not from the government, but at least a cultural pressure to become part of it.
Yeah, everybody's doing that. So he gets out of the Coast Guard, like, medical discharge.
Yeah, and I think it was. I mean, some say 3 months. I thought it was only a month, but I think probably 3 months. I'm not sure he even made it through basic training though. So, and that was always the joke why he was able to get a burial site when he and actually some benefits of being a veteran when he never really served in active duty.
Yeah.
Just...
So then somehow he gets to Moody Bible, right?
Yeah. Well, the it seems like early in life when his dad died, he had to do some work, and so he was a messenger, telegraph messenger downtown Chicago, and so just he would courier type of a thing. And then as he got older, he got his, from what I understand, he got his GED. He didn't finish high school, and then he became a machinist. He went to I think what's in Des Moines. It was right. What's the city right on the border of Illinois and Iowa? Anyway,
Bridgeport?
I don't know. My
There's one up there.
memory is fading. But anyway, so he became a machinist, and as he was a machinist, then he became a believer through the witness of. Although that's not clear in my mind too, because it was as a machinist that he became a Christian, but when it was kind of touched off by him being on an elevator one day, and this black man made a comment with regard to salvation, and it had an effect on him. And
yeah, because Uncle Nate always tells the story of a machine operator who had questioned him about his salvation.
Right. Yeah, I think that's generally the truth of the, the
but
story.
There's probably another incident too.
Yeah, I think there were other incidents. Yeah, and I don't think it was in a vacuum, because I think they had a Lutheran background, and it seems like when they went to what are the Twin Cities in
St. Paul?
No, in Iowa.
In Iowa, I don't know Iowa culture. So.
Okay, it wasn't Des Moines. I don't think it was. Anyway, he was at the arsenal there, and so what happened is that I think he was attending a Lutheran church there. And there was a man who was really a godly man in that church, okay? And that man had a great impact on his brother and himself.
Oh, because they were there together?
Because they were there together, yeah. And so, the man's name was Earl Brisman, and he taught the Sunday school, and he really had a lot of effect on them. And in fact, was very loyal to them for years when they went down to Arkansas to, rural missionaries. Brisman supported them.
Really?
So yeah. So and they had a great relationship with them.
Yeah, already learning new things compared to Uncle Phil. This is great. And then he does go to Moody to study the Bible.
And the thing is he went to the regular day school, and that was. I don't think my mom ever got into the day school. She was evening school, but so he was day school, and he would kind of supplement his income by working on the elevator at Culberson Hall.
And that's how
he met Mom. Yeah. Through that, and they've had conversations as they went up and down. Sometimes the door would close and we couldn't open.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, get stuck
on purpose.
and Grandma was from Chicago as well.
Yeah.
But had a different kind of upbringing, right?
Yeah, my dad grew up kind of in the suburbs because his dad was a contractor, and so he would build a house. And then they would live in the house, and then they would sell the house. But I think prior to that, actually before he died, they didn't do that. It was his mother that, after Father died, kind of kept that job. But what she would do is she would kind of, it seems like, contract the house out. They would live in it and then sell the house and move on. But
so she was kind of like a general contractor.
Yeah, it seems that she was a little bit entrepreneurial, and he really always spoke well of his mother. I mean, it seemed like she was kind of the Aunt Lydia of the family.
Yeah.
That she had this real just. She was entrepreneurial, which Aunt Lydia is, but she was also real gracious. I mean, people really liked her. So, yeah. And so you were talking about my mom, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she grew up basically. You would say she grew up in the ghetto, in her city, and her family was rough. They had come from England, and the father and mother had stopped in Canada on the way, and they left two children there, and then they came on down, and then the father was kind of a no-gooder. He was an alcoholic, but he got involved in the city government among the Welsh people there, and so there was kind of a good old boy system. And anyway, he had a job, but he wasn't real faithful to his.
Interesting. And I know she grew up in, kind of sounds like a apartment, like complex almost.
Yeah.
That they rented out.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and her mother must have been a go-getter too, because I mean, even though she was kind of, kind of shady, but she operated a still out of her apartment. She in the bathtub she would make the alcohol, and then she had the tenant house, of course, and that's where my mom's real dad was a tenant, and when her official dad was gone, then I think her mother formed a relationship with that tenant, and then he was known as the uncle, and it was only right before her death that she learned that she was actually the daughter of Uncle, I forget what his name, but it wasn't who she thought it was.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So he was Italian. He wasn't.
Yeah, so we always thought we were from
Welsh. Yeah, we thought we were from Welsh background.
Turns out we were Italian.
They were Italian, half Italian.
Yeah, interesting. That's funny. And so, but Grandma had a good voice, right? So when she got involved in Moody,
yeah,
she was on the radio.
And there were two sisters, that Becky, her younger sister, and then I think it was Julie, her older sister. That they were called the Joy Trio, and they would sing on WNBI.
And how did they get into Moody? Because was it who introduced themselves to, I guess, her mother?
Yeah, it was. They were in the tenant building, and one day a Moody student came by who was just doing personal evangelism, and
because it's a class that you have to do.
Moody,
right?
and it was through his testimony that the mother got saved, and I think they became kind of poster children for the evangelism of Moody, and so it was not that far. Of course, in those days, it's because of lack of transportation. I mean, it wasn't really that far from Moody. It was quite close, and so I think they just kind of hung around, and so the person who had evangelized them formed a relationship with Julie, and they got married. And so then I think he had a great impact on their lives. And then they got kind of brought into that. Also, there was kind of a mission church down on LaSalle Street that was closer to Moody. It was called Elm LaSalle Street, Elm LaSalle Church. And although they were loosely affiliated with Moody, I think Dad was more affiliated with Moody. My mother was more with LaSalle Street. But then, in the end, they got married at LaSalle Street Church.
Okay.
And
well, I recently went to Moody Church, and it's like a mega church. I didn't realize it was so big.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
It's huge. And not sure I don't know how many people go there now, but at least it's a big.
It's a big building. It's like a mini cathedral.
Yeah, a big campus, I guess you would say. Or maybe not so much campus; it's just a huge building that is there. So.
Yeah. And so Grandma and Grandpa get married at LaSalle Church. And how long did it take them before they knew they wanted to get to go to Arkansas?
Well, it wasn't very long at all.
Okay.
It was like, I think Dad had graduated. They had graduated, and they got married right around that time. And in fact, just right after getting married, they had already decided that, and Dad had decided that through a chapel service at the Moody Church. A guy came up from Arkansas and said, "We need all these churches. We need churches in Arkansas." Well, that was not true. There were a lot of churches.
Yeah, so they moved down to Arkansas and started planning churches, or did they go work in existing churches?
I'm not sure if my dad had a clue what was going on. It's kind of like this whole thing of, we got missions, it's a big thing. What are you doing, missions? Well, I mean, you go on missions, and so I think when they got down here, first of all, they were kind of shocked that there were a lot of churches down here. So their idea of church planning was kind of wasn't that
wasn't like a third world country.
No, it wasn't like a third world country. And so what happened was they had a relationship, I guess, prior to that, with a man by the name of Harlan Bartlow. And the Bartlows, so Harlan was single, and so he spent time with them. They were in a little community called Nail, and I'm not sure if he was even a pastor of that church, but they were there for a year or so, and Uncle John, was born, and not long after that, they moved down to a place called Scottsville because they heard there was a church that needed a pastor, and so they were part of that. And
Harlan Bartlow is the same Bartlow family.
Yes, and meanwhile, Harlan, Mary Lou comes from Chicago, but somehow they got married, and there were a bunch of so they were part of a group called North Arkansas Gospel Mission, and
they start Rock Haven, right?
And Rock Haven really was started, I think, before them, but it was. I remember as a child we would go there and we would build cabins. That was kind of a fun thing, and so that was a great thing. But Scottsville was kind of Dad's day-to-day ministry, whatever it was. We only had a few people in the church. One thing we did have in the church, though, was a very influential lumber family, and there was a lumber mill there in Scottsville. And so they were some brothers, I think 3 brothers and their wives and a few other people, not very many people. But there came a time when they were going to move to Russellville. And so basically they weren't going to come to church there anymore. And so when they left, the church just kind of
fell apart.
And so we moved on.
And you were born in
I was born in Dover, which is about 5 miles down the road from Scottsville. So it was a clinic, so we went to the clinic.
So, but your family was living in the same place?
Lived in the same place,
okay.
Yeah.
And so you're born there, and how long are you living before you move on to the next?
Yeah, I think I was in 2nd grade when we moved on to the next place, which would be Rudy.
Rudy, okay.
Yeah, so we went to Hector elementary school, and then we moved to Rudy.
So what was elementary school like growing up? Because you had in the order of the family, I guess we should know it's Uncle John, then Steve, and then you.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're going to school with them?
Yeah, and Hector was a little bit difficult because we were kind of bullied because we were a pastor's kid, the preacher's kid. And we had to ride a bus to school. And so there was a time when my brother John, my mom was really pushed him to hand out tracts and that sort of stuff. And he was kind of bold about it, and then there was a family on there of really redneck hillbillies that kind of ruled the bus, and they really picked on him. And so what happened was he started riding his bike to school, which was about, I don't know, it's about 5 miles, just simply to avoid the persecution,
Yeah.
And then there's story of how that the ringleader was in a car accident one night and was thrown over a highline wire, ejected from the car and was killed.
Wow.
We always looked at it as God's judgment on him, but I don't know if that was the case at all.
So that must have been later on, though.
That was when I was in first grade, second grade, and he was
because Uncle John was in.
He was in 5th grade or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, I hadn't heard that story before.
Yeah. Anyway.
And getting good grades, or was school easy for you? What was it?
Well, school was easy for me personally up till grade 8 because we read just all the time. We just devoured all the library books. So when you're a reader, you're a step ahead. You know, never learned how to study. Never learned how to study.
Was that something your mom pushed you guys to be readers, or was it just something that?
No, it was just something. There was nothing else to do. Okay. I think the thing is, my dad was really a reader. So it kind of just, yeah. It's not like anything we did so much. Why this godly direction of I'll do this type of thing. I kind of laugh when I see principles being attributed to them. I think my mom was a little more proactive, but my dad was he flew by the seat of his pants. But he had a true heart for God. So I think it's that whole thing of that he lived it before he spoke it, and he wasn't pedantic. He didn't sit there and say, "Now, son, you do this, you do this." Nah, he wasn't that at all. But you caught this mood of someone who just was really loved the Lord and was really wanting to be and urgent and all that sort of stuff.
And how were they like as parents in general? What was their parenting style?
Their parenting style was, the younger people will say that they use a rod of discipline, that sort of stuff, and they did, but not. I don't remember getting spanked after maybe 5 years old or 6. It was like, and my dad always had that idea is that he said, if you get a child before he's 2 years old, you can form the rest of his life. And so that was kind of his thing, is that's what he would do. And he was pretty rough on the young kids, and slap them around. But after, there was a certain point where he became he was not overbearing in anything. He really let us go our way quite a bit, and maybe to our detriment. But he just, Dobson probably wouldn't think he was a great parent. So,
what kind of hobbies are you guys into growing up? I hear stories of like baseball and stuff like that at camps, but
yeah. Well, the thing is that we we weren't allowed basically to be part of organized sports simply because organized sports were a lot of times on Sunday. The baseball, okay, they would have baseball on Sunday, so we couldn't play that. The other sports at the schools were we were so far away. It was just a lot of work for Dad to actually drive us there and back, and that's why a lot of us started driving really early, just so we could drive into town and park and do it.
Play sports.
But he was, they were not athletes. Mom or Dad were not athletes, but I have to assume that they were. That I think my mom was very competitive, and Dad could be competitive one moment, but the next moment,
didn't care very much.
Didn't care. They didn't care about sports at all, except for my mom. When I got into Cardinals baseball when I was around 10 or so years old, she started listening with me on the radio, and she would get pretty excited. So they hit a home run, she'd say, "Praise the Lord!" They hit a home run, and Harry Carey would be talking about, this. I always had to turn the commercial off. Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch was the sponsor. And so So whenever the commercial would come, I'd have to turn down the radio. Then when it came back, I'd come back on it.
Rebecca and Josiah were listening to Uncle Phil's podcast, and I was like, "Well, what questions would you like me to ask Uncle Joel?" And they said, "Well, we don't understand the finger story of how Uncle Joel is a missing finger." And I think I've heard it before, but maybe some people haven't. So
yeah, I've used it so many different ways. But the essential thing is my mom was sitting in the kitchen on a sewing machine, and behind was a washing machine that had broken down. But my dad had worked on it, and he had left a panel off of the bottom motor part of it, and so there was exposed was a pulley and a motor moving just right there. And I was 3 or 4 years old, and I was just fascinated by that. And so what I did, I just stuck a sheet of paper in there, and it just crunched it, and it was going around this. It was really nice, and fun. And so Mama, no, Joel, don't do that. Just yelled at me and said, don't do that. And so, I couldn't resist. And so I took another piece of paper. But when I put the piece of paper in, I stuck my finger in too far, and it caught between the belt and pulley, and it just ground to a stop, and it was just, pinched off right there. But it was still hanging by the skin. So anyway, she pried it out, and she just, she kind of pretty excited, and she put a coat on. But someone ran across the street to someone who had a phone. I don't think we had a phone at that time. And called, they knew where my dad was, and he seemed to have been at a place where there was another phone. And called and said, hey, come home. Joel's got, didn't even say finger, said, it's cut off, And he didn't know what it was. He thought it was my whole hand. And so when he got home, it was wrapped up in a coat. And I remember pleading my dad when we were on the way to the clinic, which was 3 miles, hey, tell him, put it back on. And they didn't. He just
cut it off.
Just cut the skin off, threw it in the trash can, and he sewed it up and put a Band-Aid on it.
And that was that.
That was it.
Does it change your life in any way? I mean, so you still.
I don't think it. I mean, yeah, I crushed my fingers not long ago, and it reminded me of that stinging pain, though. I do remember that. There was just a stinging that I just couldn't get rid of. Couldn't get rid of, so, and anyway.
But you were involved in music. I think there's three siblings that got to play music, right?
Yeah, that's right. And
that was after your finger was cut off.
Yeah, that was a long time after I don't think I started music till about, I would say is around 10 years old or something like that. Maybe I think about that. And I'm not sure how that started, except that there was this, I think, my dad loved music. My mother loved music, and she was, I think she was very competent in the sense that if she had had time to develop it, she would have done it. My dad just loved to listen to classical music, and we had the record player that we'd get the old 78s, and just, it was great. So anyway, that's what happened is that I think they decided to push us to music, and we did well at it. I mean, our teacher was really good, and we went to competitions, and we always did well. I mean, we were top of the line.
And you were playing piano.
No, I was only playing accordion.
Oh, accordion. Okay. How did they get an accordion for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think someone had given an accordion to us. I remember the accordion. I don't remember how it got to us, which came first. I think probably the accordion was given to us, and then that's what I decided to play. Yeah, where Philip and Ruth were involved in the piano, and and Lydia never took lessons, and Daniel took lessons at school. He became a trombone player. So
yeah, because I was kind of wondering, did everybody was this equal opportunity, or did they just choose you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with John, maybe John he wanted to play the trumpet or something. And they said, "Nah, we don't. We got too many kids around. That's too much
Yeah.
noise,
Yeah.
you know." I think he just happened to miss out on the time sequence. Is that the development of the family? And Steve, I think it was just we fit into the category right when they were transitioning to like Marcoma to the boarding school, and so it just was very appropriate for me and for Ruth, and then for Philip simply because Philip would watch us play, and he would mimic us and do it better than we could do it, and so I think that's what kind of hurdled him into it ahead of Lydia, you know, and anyway.
Do you remember any of your siblings being born?
I remember Nate being born. I think I remember Philip being born. So I would have had to have remember Lydia being born. So, yeah.
Was it a big event?
It was a big event in that that Mom was away and she had never been away. You know, and I think it's kind of fuzzy as far as what my dad did, but that was the time when.
Would somebody take care of you guys? I mean, how did that work?
Yeah, I don't remember about that because there was really no one in the church to take care of us. So I'm assuming that basically Dad had to take care of us, and if he went to pick her up at the hospital, he had to bring us with. But I don't remember those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering. Yeah, because it's always funny to hear how older kids react. Like, we have a lot of big families here. It's just funny to hear how they react to a new baby.
Yeah.
If they wanted it or not wanted it, sometimes it seems like they don't want to.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I don't remember Ruth being born. I do remember the rest of them being born, and they were born in genuine hospitals. I think it was the last one that was a little bit, you know, just out there.
In the clinic or something.
Yeah,
like that.
in the clinic. Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of like middle school, and then into high school.
Mm-hmm. Then Marcoma was the big transition thing.
Okay,
right?
and your older brothers were there, or?
Yeah, what happened, we had an traveling evangelist come through. He had a daughter at a school called Marcoma Academy. And so her name was Martha Barnett. And so they kind of lobbied for us to do that sort of thing. And it seemed a smart thing because, you know, my folks didn't have that much money. There was a work program at the school, so the idea was that, hey, we could work our way through basically. And so John went, and then Steve went, and then I went, and Ruth went, and then Ruth stayed home the senior year or something, and then Lydia went, and Philip and Nate, all the rest of them went.
And that's where you kind of learned how to work.
And that's
job.
Yeah, I would say that. You know, my dad would do small jobs once in a while. There was a furniture sales company in Alma that he would, when they needed some help, he would help out, and did some projects of just kind of handyman projects for them. But they weren't, you know, my mom was not keen on Dad doing any work. It was kind of like, no, you're in the Lord's work, and you don't do that sort of thing. So that's been a quantum change as far as our view about work. Is that my dad really loved to work, and he was always working on his cars and doing projects and stuff like that. But he was hampered with this idea that he just, you know, God's servant shouldn't be involved in earthly affairs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but
and that's obviously changed with like the uncles running.
Yeah, that's right. And we've really reacted. But the basic, we always saw Dad as a hard worker. It wasn't. I mean, he did his own kind of work, you know, and then he would help other people and that sort of stuff. But just strictly as an occupation, that wasn't just something that you did.
Yeah, so you're at Marcoma, working. What was your job? Was everybody doing kind of farming stuff, or?
Well, the guys basically did farming because you had kind of the general all around, implements dealing with that sort of thing, plowing. maybe some welding work, doing fences, welding fences. That was a big project for one time. And then we had we had the chickens, we had the pigs, and we had the cows, and the cows were milk cows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically got put in the milk
Dairy department.
The dairy department,
Pretty
which
early
was
mornings.
getting up 3:30 in the morning and doing it. Where I think some of the other brothers were involved with the chickens, and also I think Daniel was involved in the farming and that too.
So Marcoma is like selling basically these kind of products to pay for their school.
Yeah, I mean I'm not sure how much money they made back on it, but the dairy, of course, the milk truck would come and pick that up, and that was good. The pig farm became, I think it kind of provided money, and the chickens were that. So yeah, and the women were pretty much involved in just the cooking and the laundry and that sort of stuff. Although toward later on, they became more equal in the sense that the girls were involved in farming
too.
Work. Yeah.
Was there any influential teachers or people in your life at this time?
Yeah, I would say I'd say the most influential was a guy by the name of Fleming. He was a farmer from Kansas, and he was in charge of the dairy, and so I felt like he kind of sort of held me accountable. I mean, not a whole lot, but I mean, I look at the things that I got away with and did. It wouldn't fit into the Faith Bible Fellowship mode. I mean, I was not. I mean, I was in a sense, I was I was always interested in spiritual things, but morally, I was just not that great. I was lazy. And the problem at a boarding school is just the relationship between girls and boys, and when you don't have that direct parental influence,
oversight,
it's pretty dangerous, and I think the Lord was gracious to us because it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as like salvation and those kind of things, where was it in high school, or I mean, you grew up in a Christian family, right? So when things started getting more like kind of serious.
Yeah, I would say that I mean, I remember when I was 4, maybe more than 4, I was maybe 7 or so, that I became. I mean, at 4, my mother had me pray with her, and I do remember that, but it was like there was this God consciousness, and I remember one time on the playground, I'm sitting there playing marbles, and then all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with the thought of God, and I just kind of like, oh God, and so I mean it was there, but there was because you grow up in a Christian family, you're in doubt whether you're really did it, So then we went through all these camp altar calls, that just ad nauseum, and so every time you felt like you had to make another. Maybe I wasn't honest the first time,
Yeah.
So that sort of stuff. I do remember.
Was camp influential for you? I mean,
I would say it was influential, but it also showed the dark side. We would go to this camp. It wasn't Rock Haven, but another camp where Brother Holvik was the sponsor of the camp, and basically his idea of having my dad there was my dad could give a 15-minute sermon, and then Brother Holvik would take over. And we would sing 20 stanzas of Just As I Am. It was just an emotional, pull him out there, you got to walk the aisle type of thing. And so, I mean, I remember being very, with my brother Steve, we would just kind of look at it and say, boy, this is much garbage,
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't anti-God. I think we got that healthy skepticism from our parents. It was kind of like, this is really not the way God intended it,
Yeah, kind of therapeutic, right?
Yeah. So, but I would say that I kind of coasted I coasted in everything. I mean, I was considered bright, okay? But I just abused it because I did not learn to study, and my grades in high school were just terrible, and meanwhile my other all my other, except for John, I don't think John was that great a student. But Steve was an ideal student. Ruth was a good, Daniel, all of those guys, I was just not good about that. And it wasn't because I just didn't develop and again, I place it back on the fact that since I was such a reader, I just had such an advantage that I was, I had 11th, 12th grade reading ability when I was, and we're all aware of that now, but at that time it was like, I was just so far ahead of everyone. Yeah. But boy, when it caught up bad, and my grades in high school were just not good.
Yeah. So I guess I don't know if there's any other formative events in high school. You are playing sports at Marcoma now, right? You're allowed to.
Yeah.
And are you involved in the singing thing?
Yeah, we were involved in everything. We would travel during the summer with singing groups. And I think that was, we would have to give a testimony. And so we learned very early to give testimonies. We learned, I preached a lot at the school when I was in 10th grade.
Really?
Grade, yeah.
For chapel and stuff?
Yeah, chapel. Yeah, and I would preach when we'd go.
Is that something Steve and John did too?
Yeah. We were all involved in it, and we were kind of the academy depended on us for their PR, and so we were PR people, and we saw the dark side of Christian organizational public relations type of thing.
Which would be?
Well, which is just, it becomes a money-making thing. Yeah. You create an entity, and then you spend the rest of your time using it to create income to keep going. It's just a self-perpetuation thing. Mm-hmm. And I will say we had some negative influence. We had some homosexual teachers at the Bible Academy,
really?
And so there was
that early.
Yeah, that early, and so we learned we grew up in the shadow of a lot of just country preachers and the early celebrity preachers where we really, you can understand why people like Uncle Nate are so down on these all these health wealth things, because we grew up in a cauldron of that, and we learned that basically you couldn't depend on what anyone said. It was just they were not living life that they were talking about. So
that's interesting. I have a question about, just a random question. What is your first car? I always think it's kind of interesting. When did you get your first car? What was it? And was it kind of exciting, or get some sense of freedom?
Yeah, well, we were a ragtag team as far as cars. Dad would bring a car down. He would go up once a year to Chicago to go to a missionary conference there, kind of report on what was happening, and also he would sometimes go to Founders Week, which was be a Moody thing. And he had an old roommate there whose name was Willard, and Willard had cars in Chicago would rust very quickly, and so they were cheap, and so he would get a car up there and bring it down, and then we'd use it as a family, or if we had an extra one, it was just kind of like a junker. And so we had a kind of a cooperative car that one that we remember most was a International Scout, and that was you could take the top off of it, and
cool.
And it wasn't 4-wheel drive, but it was pretty cool. Yeah. It was nice.
Yeah, nowadays it'd be cool.
And so that's what we drive to town to. I would drive when I was in 8th grade to town on the outskirts on the country roads, and then I'd park there. Then I'd walk into the town so that I didn't get stopped by the police.
Yeah.
And we would take it. Summer jobs, we'd pick tomatoes or beans, and we'd drive that. And so that was. But my first car actually was, I think it was a. Not a Pinto. I don't know. I better not say. I remember we got one that was a nice little car, and I just quickly lost the title to it. So I never was able to use it. It just made me so sick, So Anyway.
And so you graduate high school. What year did you graduate?
72 I graduated.
72.
Yeah.
And like Vietnam stuff is over?
Yeah, it had, 72 was the big year. I think even a little earlier than that, 69 was kind of the cutoff. John actually got a number, but he was never called up.
Drafted.
And then it was not an issue with us.
After that.
No, it was
so it wasn't something that was in your mind?
No, it wasn't ever thought, I never bothered.
And it seems like the protests were mostly in the cities, so that probably wasn't a big deal in the country, was it?
No, it wasn't a big deal. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, the Beatles music, that was a lot earlier. I mean, the whole. I remember the Beatles music, hearing it the first time coming out church one night, and this one girl there had the radio on, and said, "This is it." But we didn't have TV. We didn't know anything about it. Yeah.
So you graduate high school in 72, and then off to college. And it seems like had Steve and John gone to Moody first, or
they had gone to Moody, yeah.
And then, but you don't go to Moody right away, right?
No, and I don't know why. I was thinking I wanted to go into a speech type of major, and I was going to go to Southwest Missouri State. I thought that would be good, and then I was in a track meet. Marcoma traveled to Tabor College for a Christian high school track meet, and
that's kind of a long trip, isn't it?
A long trip, yeah. And the only reason I can think I went to that school is that I did well at the track meet that day, and I just thought, well, maybe there's more success for me here.
So a good time.
And there was a guy, Dennis Fast, who was who had relatives somewhere tied to Arkansas and with Rock Haven. And Dennis Fast came down one summer, and he was a counselor at that school, and so I got to know him. And I think that kind of had an impact on him. But he kind of followed up. He was kind of a student,
almost ambassador.
And so I think that's why I ended up there. And I was just out left field as far as school.
Well, college. Tabor College is in the middle of nowhere, basically Kansas.
Yeah. Of course, I was a hillbilly, but here's the deal: I was a hillbilly that the last few years of high school, I went to Chicago and I parked cars because John was in Chicago at the time. So I parked cars on the the worst street in the world, almost Rush Street. It was you had your bars, you had your strippers, you had all that sort of stuff, and they would come into the parking lot. So I mean, in a sense, I really was exposed to things pretty quickly. But when I came to Tabor, just everyone is they didn't smile. They didn't. I mean, I was just.
Well, it's not exactly the South.
No, it wasn't the South at all.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that you went to Chicago in high school in the summers.
Yeah, I think it was 2 summers that I went. I went there during an interterm period. Well, that would have been when I was in college, but it was the year before college that I went.
How did you get to Chicago from Arkansas?
Well, I just drove up with my. I think I drove up with my brother. He probably came down.
He came down and visited.
He
and just right back with him.
Yeah.
And then real quick, in track, what was your events?
Well, I ran hurdles, and they were the 110 low hurdles.
Hurdles.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't fast at all.
Yeah.
I was not fast. I'm not like your dad. But for some reason, no one else was fast on that, and so I won it.
Yeah, so getting into Tabor College, that's where my dad and mom went to school. But my dad is your age, right? And mom is 2 years younger than you. So how did you meet Dad? Yeah,
we became suite mates. Okay. There was a fourplex, and so we were in the same thing. Somehow we hit it off, and. The thing is he was really into sports, and I was. I mean, I wanted to be in sports, but I didn't have the talent, and he had the talent, and so and I basically had to work. So I would ride my bike out to the farm, and I'd milk cows for a local farmer, and also a grain. I'd shovel grain, and I was always a little bit kind of. I thought, boy, he's got it nice. He can do these sports. And I got to work.
Yeah.
But I had that by that time. I'd gotten a '53 Chevy from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was his
ride.
His ride. Yeah. So I mean, I remember every weekend is like nothing's happening in town. What can we do? The closest Pizza Hut was in McPherson.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we drive up there. But
yeah. So what was Dad like in college? I mean, so I'm the youngest of the family, so I don't know. I feel like my version of Dad is a lot different than even David's or something like that.
Well, I mean, the thing is he was well liked by the athletes because he was good. I mean, and the black athletes really liked him because he was fastest white boy on the team.
And that's something different about Tabor College is they had pretty diverse.
Yeah. Well, what they did is they recruited like in Pennsylvania and in Louisiana, and they brought these inner city people up to school. Which, can you imagine? How they? I mean, it was just. Them to come out there. It was just amazing. That they would be there, and a Mennonite community really didn't like interracial dating or anything like that, and they'd immediately find a girlfriend there. And we're pretty loose. The way they did it, and Jerry was a bona fide athlete there. And I think that really gave him the status. And, he was always, he was Mennonite. I mean, he was measured, he wasn't like me. And so he fit in very well there. And because of just ethnically and culturally, he was, he was a run-of-the-mill type of, run of the mill in the sense that didn't do anything strange. Well, I was kind of like an outlier, and not necessarily in a good way. It was just like, and I always felt inferior there because it was different culture. I could not read how people thought toward me, and it was very important. Growing up, I was a man pleaser, and I wanted to know that I was liked. Mm-hmm. And later on, I would learn that, I was pretty well liked, and, different girls would come up later on, years later, and say, boy, I had a crush on you. I thought, boy, I had no idea, And so I was happy. I'm happy I didn't have that idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. So everybody's going to Moody. You go to Tabor, right? Mm-hmm. And then Mom also comes to Tabor College.
Yeah.
Did you kind of like convince her to come, or
no? I don't think I did. It's just she did.
She seems to be kind of like a rebel of the family.
Well, she was. I think Mark Homa kind of created in her that, and she did, and so I think. Also, I think she felt she had a little bit of a protectiveness for me. She kind of, I didn't like that, but she meant well. And so,
Were you two pretty close siblings?
In age we were, although she and Daniel were close too. She was kind of the tipping point, It was kind of, she's kind of like the tie between the old and the new. Yeah. So she saw both sides. In a sense, she may have been more with the older people because in later years, she's kind of resisted the younger push, So she was a little bit of a rebel like me. But when she came to Chicago, Chicago was a big draw for a lot of us just simply because it was a job situation, and so and I think just Jerry and my relationship had a lot to do with the fact that they got together. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if it was love at first sight. It was just kind of like a comfortable situation. And I think your dad was sharp enough to see that there was something more with her than most of the girls. Yeah. Because he had his girlfriends, at Tabor.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an athlete, you pick
Yeah, and I mean, there's a few girls who dated that were just, they were, good athletes, and I think that was a lot of it.
Yeah, so Dad, I'm guessing the first time they met was you took him home to Arkansas, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And I think that was the first thing that he met.
She went to Tabor College, and then we'll have to ask them more about how that worked
and
out.
then, of course, she transferred pretty soon and went to nursing school.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so you and Aunt Susan, did she go to Tabor College too?
No, she didn't. The only she was, she got saved as soon as she came back from running away from her home for a year of time. She worked as a maid for a rich family, and then she got saved when she got back, and then immediately she was through a church meeting at Central, was exposed to World Impact, and they basically took her on as a project. And one of the girls working there was Carol West, and so Carol really kind of mothered her in a sense. But she was really on fire for the Lord, and she was anyway. So she was kind of coordinating the kids club program, and I would come down with Jerry to the club, and so we met each other there.
Because you guys were involved in World Impact even before, in college, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And was that something Tabor pushed you to do, or is it
No, actually I got involved because Jerry was Al Ewart, who was the director there, would come down and see Jerry all the time, and kind of push him to be part of the summer program. Yeah. And so I ended up doing it.
Just being Dad's ride there.
Yeah, well, and your dad never became part of the program, and I did, Yeah. And then as I joined it, then I got to know, Susan. Because of joining the program, I didn't have money to go back to Tabor, so I transferred to Wichita State.
Okay. So you finished your college at Wichita State.
Yeah, I was sophomore. I did my sophomore year at Tabor. And I was a terrible student. My grades were just, you look at my transcripts. I just played tennis the whole, I skipped classes. And I was a mess. What can I say?
I didn't realize you were a shocker. And so that's where you met Aunt Susan, right? And then what stood out about, I guess what degree are you still pursuing?
Yeah, I was pursuing, speech, public address, emphasis. And I had no clue why I was doing it. But it's just.
Looking back, was it just something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, I had been interested in debate, and that's why my interest in Southwest Missouri State, because they had an incredible debate team. But then I don't know, for whatever, I didn't pursue that, and so that was my thought. Well, speech,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting. And then so when you meet Aunt Susan doing, Bible clubs, what stood out to you about her that was different? What was
Well, I think Susan was really she was always a bright spot. She was always full of energy, and the thing is that meanwhile I wasn't interested in her at all, but she had this. She told me later that she had felt this very clear impression, and she thought the Lord was telling her that, don't worry, you'll end up with him, okay? And
so she wasn't really chasing you or anything like that?
She wasn't chasing me, but she kind of had this sense of it's going to happen. Really, that's the way and she didn't use it as a bludgeon, Yeah. It was just something that and so when I had other girlfriends, it's just, well, I'll get my time, So, but you could sense a little bit of. I remember talking to this one girl, and she said, "Boy, Susan doesn't seem to like me very much." And now later on, I put it together. Yeah.
And so, how long are you involved in World Impact after you graduate?
Yeah, I was.
When do you get when do you get married to Susan and when do you graduate? How does that all? What is that?
Yeah, what I did is I took a year more because I lost a lot of my credits from Tabor because I didn't have good grades on some of them, and I just kind of I put them away. Then after 3 years, 3 years at Wichita State, I worked full time at World Impact. But then, so I graduated in '77, I guess it was. And right after graduation, I was transferred to St. Louis. And
with World Impact.
With World Impact. And it was right before I went there that we started talking to each other. So then our relationship was a distance relationship.
Yeah.
And then the following May, we got married.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I guess there's St. Louis, but you're also living in Chicago in the future. So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, it happened because we were married and we were just with World Impact for several months, and we had a falling out because we were in a communal situation and we had a new director, and the new director didn't understand. He was a young Christian. He didn't know better. That there was something inviolate about the husband and wife relationship. That I was the authority and he kind of saw that he was the authority. That basically he could deal directly with her. Yeah. Well, when you're newly married, you don't like that sort of challenge. So we left, and then the only place really to go was we went down south to Arkansas for a couple of weeks, ministered to the hippies back in the hills, and then we went up to Chicago and started working with my brother John.
And you're doing basically carpentry.
Yeah, we did painting. He was doing painting pretty much. Yeah. So.
Okay, and Uncle Phil talks about how he would work for you guys.
Yeah.
How long were you in Chicago working?
Well, we were there 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and you have some kids there, right?
Yeah, we had Sam and Mary and Lydia.
And then eventually, missions becomes kind of a thing again. And how does that? How do you guys start thinking about that? Was that something you always wanted to do, or?
Well, again, it was the sort of thing where someone else was involved. Uncle Nate went to Urian Jaya, and he how he talks about everything, just flowing, and he had great plans to be a missionary and that sort of stuff. I heard, going to the headhunters, and I thought, well, they need the Lord, and that sort of thing. So I started thinking about it.
Missions in Papua New Guinea?
In Urian Jaya, the other side of Papua New Guinea. And so, again, I didn't consult with Susan there very much. I mean, that was not good. And I think it's the typical thing when you're about 30, 32, 33 years old, and you think life's getting away from you, and I need to do something significant for the Lord.
Yeah.
I think it's a real vulnerable point, and I thought, we were involved in the inner city,
a church, right?
Church, and we were, it was a great thing. We had great relationships there. I would work in all the houses of the people of the church. They loved us, But I kind of got the idea that, no matter how long I try, I'm white, and I just kind of felt frustration that, they can always look at me and say, well, he's white. Of course he's going to be this. And so I thought, well, maybe this is not the best situation. So then, he went to Urian Jaya and he came back, and I thought, well, let's do it. And so we decided to do it.
And what's the process to start becoming a missionary?
Yeah. Well, it's you get to raise support basically, and we weren't kind of in that mode. So what we did is we had to get our Bible. We had to get our Bible credits, and so we both went to Moody. We would trade with the kids, and I was still working.
So you do that at night?
They did it at night.
Wow.
Yeah. And sometimes during the day would have a day program to some, but we had to get 30 hours each, and she had to get them too. So, yeah, we did that, and meanwhile, we're just kind of trying to save up money.
Yeah.
And then,
how long was this process? 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, I think I was probably about. Yeah, I think it was at least 3 years, maybe 4, and we weren't great. We couldn't get into Urian Jaya is the problem. We kept trying to apply for a visa, and we were approved by the mission board. We went to a missions conference, and but then we couldn't get in. And then one day, a guy at the missions headquarters said, I was in Turkey. He said, you can get into Turkey and teach English there, and you can make your way. And so that's where we headed.
So Turkey, yeah. What had you ever? I mean, like really thought about moving to Europe, or like just kind of like, okay, this is an opportunity. We're just going to take it and go for it.
Yeah.
Basically.
So. Yeah.
That's just the rationale.
Yeah.
And what was did you have to learn Turkish as a language before you went?
No, we did it there.
Okay.
And so, the idea was I was going to teach. In order to get in there, we had to have some kind of job,
Yeah.
So
because missionary work is illegal. Correct?
Yeah, it's illegal. So we got there, and so we were there for, 6 months or so, and then I applied at the university there, and meanwhile I had learned some language.
So you're teaching university.
Yeah, teaching English in university.
And that's where are you living in Turkey at this time?
And we were in Istanbul on the Bosporus Strait.
Yeah, so pretty big city.
Yeah, big city. Yeah.
And what was your house like?
Well, our first house was the typical apartment building there, and we were overlooking the Bosporus, though. It's just an unbelievable view. Watch all the tankers come through.
Yeah.
Then we moved to another apartment, and then there was a old house that is very traditional house that we've had. It's a wood structure. None of the houses are wood structures now, but it was overlooking a street. It had called a jumbala type of upper stairs that actually came out over the sidewalk, and so and it was really, really old and decrepit, but it had its own garden enclosed in the wall, and so I thought, I want to do that, and so we told the owner we'd fix it up,
So you're renting it.
And we were renting it.
Yeah. And you've already been fixing up houses for a while.
Yeah,
so not a problem.
Yeah, well, it's different there, but I mean, yeah.
And so you're teaching. I mean, what is your strategy, right? Being a missionary, teaching English, right? How did you work in the gospel?
Well, in a sense, it wasn't hard because they knew, just as a foreigner, they assumed every foreigner was a Christian, and so my mode of operation was I thought, I will talk to everyone about anything, and I will work as much as I can, just side jobs or whatever, just to keep me out in the public.
Yeah.
Okay, keep me out. And my understanding, and I still think this is if you talk to someone long enough, the gospel is going to become the key part of that conversation. Yeah. And it did with the students, it did with the teachers, it did with everyone. And they had since I was one of the few foreigners a lot of them had ever really known, they had the impetus too to convert me. I mean, that's a star in your crown when you, so, they were coming at me to convert me. So it made it easy for me,
Were there special people that you remember talking to? I mean, what are the highlights of
Well, there was one man who was a fellow teacher who had gone as an exchange student to Indiana University, and so he had lived with Mennonite Christians actually there. So I had that Mennonite type of connection, and he is a dear man. He's just a wonderful man. He's probably dead now, and I would say that was one of my highlights as far as relationship. But then there were young people that lived in the neighborhood that Sam grew up with, and that I would I was kind of like a father to them. The one didn't have a father. The other had a father who was a military guy who was just nothing. And then two others lost their father soon after we were there. So, I mean, it was great,
Yeah.
But we'd take them to some Christian events, that sort of thing. But we didn't have a lot of success. So.
Yeah. Did that ever get kind of frustrating? I mean,
no. I mean, I wasn't frustrated for lack of fruit. I mean, it was just like I felt like the frustrating thing. We had to deal with language, and I never felt like my language was that good. Yeah. And so, I couldn't do things like Bible. I did some Bible studies in Turkish, but I mean, I just thought, why in the world would I do this? This is, So, I mean, and in the end, our frustration became that we had a lot of missionaries there per Christians. I mean, for the small amount of Christians in Turkey, we had a whole lot of missionaries.
Yeah.
And there was this sense of, well, I got to grab this one as mine, I have some sense of success,
Yeah.
And it wasn't good in some senses. So, I mean, in a sense, I thought, really, what is the value of us being here? So,
And how is it like raising children? Because at this time you have five, and some of them are born in Turkey, or are they all? Okay.
Jody was born in Turkey. Phil was born when we were in Turkey, but we were in the States when he was born.
Okay.
So, yeah. It's probably the best type of situation you could ever have. I mean, it was just, you didn't have all the different activities. Basically, you're at home every night with your kids, and there's no sports or anything like that. So they're sitting there reading their books, And when you go on a field trip, it's like it's short. I mean, we went to Mediterranean, we went to the Aegean, the Black Sea. We traveled along all these old places, and I mean, it was pretty neat.
Yeah, I had some questions. Like, I mean, Turkey is a pretty historic spot. Obviously, like the Roman Empire is important there, but also is historic in since a lot of the early Christian churches were there.
Yeah.
And I don't know I'm assuming you visited many of those kind of locations. And what was that kind of like special, or I don't know, did that impact you at all? Like, was it fun? I don't know, what are your takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway was the fact that realization that at one time in the distant past, over 1,500 years ago, it was a Christian nation. I mean, it was churches everywhere.
Christian nation, right?
It had been Christianized. And you go through on your trips and you just see all these old churches, just ruins, all over the place. And you just realize, isn't it amazing, that can happen? It kind of gave me a sense of what America is in for, So that was pretty potent, that type of exposure.
Was it ever kind of scary? I don't know, if you're technically not a missionary, not allowed to be a missionary, was there any like kind of fear? Yeah,
I mean, in a sense. I mean, I realized pretty early on that they don't pick on expatriates. I mean, it's the Muslim population that becomes Christian that is in trouble. Yeah. And so, I mean, I only felt danger one time, and it wasn't really danger. I traveled east with a guy who was well known for getting in trouble and getting in jail, and we were way out in the eastern province, among the Kurds and that sort of thing, and we were carrying a whole bunch of Bibles and information, that sort of stuff, and we came into a town, and we were immediately reported to the police, so they came and questioned us, Thankfully, they never checked in our bags or anything like that. And he said, "Well, we were here at the request of someone, we had contact with, So, anyway, that was about the only thing. It was a little bit disconcerting to me because I hadn't started my teaching yet, and I was trying to get into university, and I knew that if that went on my record, that probably I wouldn't be able.
Probably couldn't be a teacher.
Yeah.
And how many years are you in Turkey for?
We were there for 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
So from about 30 to 45 or something like that?
Yeah. What do you mean?
Like years old?
I was, I think 35. Let's see, that would have been, we went in 79. Yeah, 79. And we came back in 2002. Yeah, so
that would be
54. So I was 35, and we came back 89. I'm sorry, 89. Yeah. So we came back. I would have been. Let's see. When we went, I was 35, and we came back. I was 48.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a pretty long time in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
and that would become part of your who you are, right?
Yeah, I think so.
What is your kind of favorite part about living in Turkey? I mean, there's a difference, right, between America and Turkey, but
Yeah, I would say the thing is the I don't just the laid back. I'm not laid back, but different culture in the sense that
not as much of a hustle culture.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, things are just simpler there, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and you don't have. Of course, it's changed there now, I think, but and I mean, just there was exposure to different. I mean, different places. We went to things that normally be pretty exotic, you know, and we just lived in it, you know.
Mm-hmm. And what was maybe the hardest difference? Obviously, language barrier is probably not fun.
Yeah, I think I was always second guessing whether it's something we should be doing. You know? I mean, I just thought, and after we left, I second guessed again. You know, so that's just my nature. But I think I was never sold on the value of what we were doing. I mean, it was good, but I mean, really, wasn't there a better way? You know.
Yeah.
And so I was always conscious of the money that was being given to us.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know, but then, you know, I lived back here and I got people back here were just looking for ways to use their money because there was nothing really going on that they felt good about.
And but what's something as like a missionary living overseas that you think you learned or understood that maybe people in America don't quite something that you learn that's different? I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
Well, here's something that really, coming back, that really has bothered me. And just how glibly people talk about they're going to hell. You know, they say, well, they're all going to hell over there, you know. Well, I mean, we're talking about dear friends of mine over there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that I don't believe that they're going to hell, you know, but to say it glibly is just hits me, just shocks me.
Because they're people.
They're people, and they're dear people, you know, and they, in a sense, they have. I mean, they do have this. They have as much interest in God as people here, and probably more, you know, who call themselves Christians. So it doesn't cause me to change my theology. What it does is say, you know, lighten up a little though, and have a little more heart of God, because I don't think God's pleased that the you know, sinners perish.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that was a big shock when I would come back and you know, I would hesitantly, in a sense, talk about, you know, eternal judgment, and not because I didn't believe it. It's just that I didn't know the whole story, you know, and I felt like it was really just didn't show the heart of God for someone to speak so brutally about people that they had no clue of, you know, they were like.
Yeah, since it's easier if you don't have a personal relationship with them.
That's right.
To kind of judge them, right?
Yeah.
But they're still people.
Yeah.
Do you think there's kind of a lack of urgency? Easier to just be like, oh, we don't know them. We don't care. They're going to hell.
I think that is it. I think the thing is, it's just like why Air Force is the preferred, you know, thing of defense, is that, you know, you can shoot someone from 5,000 miles away and never have to deal with it. But, you know, Army is face to face, you know, and you know, the whole thing of bayonets and that sort of stuff. And I think what you see with regard to Christians who look at over there, they need to. They're both are necessary. One is to see them as real people, and to see that they're just like us, you know. But on the other hand, you don't want to fawn over them either, you know, and say, well, the beautiful native, you know. Well, they're sinners just like the rest of us, you know. So I think just a realistic view, you know.
Yeah. So you moved back to the States, back to Sherwood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to Chicago, which is different.
Yeah.
What kind of... Because Uncle Steve and Uncle John still were living in Chicago, but now you have Uncle Dan and Uncle Phil.
Yeah.
and Lydia lived. Well, I don't know where Lydia is at this time, but living in Sherwood.
Yeah.
So what was kind of the choice between Chicago and Arkansas?
Yeah, I think it had to do with our children, because when we were in Turkey, our kids always came back to Arkansas, and that's where they had their roots. And so I think it was a no-brainer.
Okay. Yeah, because some of your kids would come back and do high school, and they would live with mom and dad, right?
Yeah.
Was that ever hard to kind of send them back?
Oh, yeah. Sam was really hard one to send back. I was in shock for a year after that, and then each one, and that probably had a lot to do with our final decision to come back here.
Yeah.
Because it's like
kind of missing out on their lives.
Yeah, and I don't know if that. Again, I've dealt with the Lord on that, but I don't know if it's good or bad. But it's kind of like they are my children,
Yeah.
and so there is some responsibility
To raise them.
And so yeah, I mean, I think it was a good choice, to come back here.
But what was the hardest part about moving back to Arkansas? Or is there's also probably another culture shock. There's culture shock when you go to the mission field, and there's also culture shock when you come back, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it was sure a lot easier. I remember just walking through the grocery line and speaking in English, thinking, boy, I do this so easily and so well,
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh man, there is this burden, there is this burden, that you have, that you've got to speak in another language, and that's tough. And it wasn't easy there. I mean, there, but you come back here and you think, oh boy, it's so easy.
Yeah, easy life. Yeah. And would you say you still kind of had that missions mindset, just doing your own thing here?
Yeah, and I think what convinced me of that is that on the trip to Turkey, one of the trips back and forth, I sat with a guy from France for hours and talked about spiritual things. He didn't have a clue about spiritual things.
Yeah.
Probably the best conversation I had about the Lord with someone on my whole time in Turkey. It was on the way, okay? Yeah. And so my thought is that, what, God is not limited to my direct communication with Turks. Mm-hmm. It is very possible that in a given day I can run into someone from Turkey here and have an impact on that person's life that will then impact someone back, the chain reaction.
Yeah, so, and then from what I remember, growing up, you always had rental houses, and that was kind of what you got into. Did you ever start working with the uncles, or was it always doing your own thing?
No, I worked with Nate. I worked with Nate for quite a while, but at that time I started not feeling so good. I wasn't really capable of staying up with the work, and he was paying me very good. He was always gracious. I mean, he was wonderful, But I just felt like, no, I need to have the freedom not to do so much work.
Yeah.
And with Nate, you work for.
Oh yeah, he works hard. Yeah.
And so the natural thing was kind of like, well, to fix up a house, because I fixed up houses in Chicago and other places, and it just worked out.
Yeah.
The Lord provided.
Yeah, I remember growing up, you used to hire us to do. I can't believe you paid us money to work on your houses. I don't know. I remember some fun times working underneath houses and stuff like that.
Oh boy!
And you always seem to have a random person that we didn't know working with you. Mm-hmm. Was that kind of something that you just enjoyed, or kind of part of strategy there?
I think it was part of strategy. This is so good. In Chicago, I had several people that had no clue about any kind of work with me, and I felt like it really had a long-lasting effect.
Yeah. So, Yeah, and then you kind of get into the auction later, right?
Yeah.
And how did what was the first time you went to the auction?
Oh, it was just wonderful, and we had been trying to find out where you can get building supplies cheap, and we'd go to AIC, I think it was an AI, something or another. It was a junk place that we always wondered, where did they get this sort of stuff? Mm-hmm. And then when I would buy stuff off Craigslist, I'd go to a guy and he'd have all this stuff, and I'd didn't have the courage to ask him,
Where you got it from?
where he got it. But one day, Jimmy at church, who knew this guy, came to me with just like he was conspiratorial. He said, "I know where he gets this stuff." And so the next week we showed up at the auction, and poor Jeff was like, "Oh, there goes my customer." And from then on, I was married to it. I mean, I just thought this is the way to go,
And then sometime in there, basically, you were in charge of building the church, right?
Yeah, I think, what happened, right.
Which is no small project.
Yeah, but the thing is that I wasn't doing the planning or anything like that. Although in the end, I did quite a bit on my own. But yeah, I mean, that was a great thing for me. I wasn't doing well at the time health-wise, and I got Sam involved with me. That really helped me, and that was a great thing,
Yeah, what's kind of mentioned health struggles a little bit. What's your? Because I think everybody will eventually go through something health related that is outside of their control, right?
Yeah.
And what has been your kind of strategy or motto? Like, how do you keep enduring, basically?
Yeah. Well, the main problem is I look back is that I allowed myself get into the trap of thinking I was responsible for my health. Okay?
Yeah.
That was, it's kind of like, hey, if I'm responsible for it, I need to do the best I can to do it. And I became too conscious of myself, of my health. And as a result, it just tumbled into this morass that it caught me by surprise, And it happens when you get older and you start feeling aches and pains. And when you're young, it's like, this will go away, type of thing. When you get older, you think, well, this may be really something serious.
Yeah.
And you get in that mindset, and it just absolutely grabs you, and it holds you hostage. So for, I would say, 10, 15 years, I was a hostage to it, and my pains were real, but they were also brought on by my reaction to it. And it's hard to know. And I see so many people suffering from the same thing, and you can't say, "Well, you're not suffering." There's terrible suffering. I was in days of just hour after hour. Sometimes I think I can't make it through this next 15 minutes. The pain was so bad. But looking back, it was a lot of it was induced psychologically, and so I think the Lord rescued me out of it. But I think one of the main ingredients was a book I read. It was called Back in Control. And the author was a surgeon, and he used the experience of people he had operated on years and years. And he said, I was a great surgeon, but he said, I had the same pain when I was finished. And he said, and so the whole idea of a neuroplasticity is that the realization that there are circuits that we create. Every moment we're creating these circuits, and the more we dwell on these things, we dig channels that become default channels. And so he had a protocol basically of how to get out of that. And one of them had to do with just descriptive writing. Every day, 20 minutes of writing on a piece of paper. And you just write whatever comes to mind. You don't think about what you're going to write. After you've finished it, you don't think about what you wrote. You just take it, tear it up, throw it away. And it's as he studied it, it's not a psychological thing. It's a very much a physical thing. And so anyway, what happened is that I think that helped me get out of it. And
because you're just thinking about the pain.
Yeah.
You think about the pain, and it's like, oh, it's still there, just deepening that.
Yeah, it's
cycle.
deepening the cycle. And he had different things, which is, first of all, you don't talk about your pain.
Yeah.
You only talk about it with someone who can help you, okay?
Interesting.
The doctor. So you don't share it with anyone. And that was a big deal in my life. It became part of my persona. And then this writing seemed to form and I began to, when I would write, I began to make it a prayer. So I would just, when I wrote, I would just write to God. It was like, dear God, here I am today. You already know what I'm thinking. And I might say some just stupid things, but it was just things that were going in my mind,
Yeah.
And after I did that, I would tear it up, and it just all of a sudden, I just start seeing just a separation from it, and I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about kind of processing things through writing because it's the ultimate disconnect from it, right? You put it down on paper,
That's
and then
right.
you disconnect from it, you step back from it,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah,
almost like it has lost its kind of effect on you because you've written it down.
yeah, that's right.
And now it's out of your mind.
No, I think that's the summary. And tearing up the paper was very key.
Really?
And not reading it over, not reading it at all. Just throwing it away. And I saw a very much biblical principles in that, which is the renewing of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That this was a very practical element to change your whole thought patterns. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that I'm sure the Lord was in the end that it was the Lord, but He did give me that information, And I see, for example, things that other people are going through, and I think, you could really profit from just this
writing it down,
and you could probably do the same thing to look into a mirror and talk to yourself, It probably accomplish the same, but it has been shown that you form neural pathways that are new. And this guy's idea is you can't get rid of the old neural pathways. They're gonna, those ravines have been etched. What you do is you form another one, and then you continually default to that, and you get in the habit, and it's taken care of.
Yeah. So that pretty much brings us up to the present, right?
Yeah.
But so now you're married, but you also have grandkids and all that. Probably can hear some of them downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
You're having breakfast, so we'll try to wrap it up quick. But the last question I'd like to ask, I asked Uncle Phil kind of how he would define love.
Mm-hmm.
He gave, I thought, a good definition. But you're in a different situation than he is. Your life has been different. Mm-hmm. You're married, and so I guess how would you define love, and what does that mean to you? And then the other thing is what's something that if you're going to give advice to somebody who would like to be married or is married about, like, from the guy's point of view, what's something about you that you wish probably Susan would change? Does that make sense? So like a self-critical way to be.
What I would change
about yourself.
What I change about myself.
So we'll start with love, and then we'll move on to kind of life advice.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing I've become realized is that the verse which says deals with how can you love God whom you're not seeing if you don't love the one you see. It's in that sort of thing. I can't think of the exact words, but I have become convinced that love of God is not shown in acts of devotion, going to a mountaintop or Bible study or anything like that, is what we show to a real human being. That is it. There is no love of God without a love for a human being, not a dog, not anything else. And I think that is the great missing element in the sense of what a spirituality is, because we have super spiritual people who love the Bible study, who love to do all that stuff, but the end result is not devotion and sense of praise and worship to God. It is the actual love of a physical, real human being.
Sacrificing.
Yeah, sacrifice. Yeah, and so I'm not too impressed by people who talk a good talk. It's like talking about a football team or something like that. So.
Yeah.
And with regard to Susan, I have been a terrible husband because I've always been more interested in my plans than what she went along with it. And that's a big mistake in marriage, is you just realize when you're married, I'm telling you what, your plans don't mean anything, So I wish that I had been much more. I've drugged her through the muck and the mire. Everything that we've done in the past has been basically, I come up with an idea and I either convince her of it or she's in a good graces just goes along with it. But I mean, there is a fine line because you do have to show initiative.
Yeah, you have to be a leader, and you can't
Yeah.
just have no ideas, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I cheat on it because I realize that in the end, she's going to like it. You know, for example, this food thing, you know. This is not for the tape, but I mean, I took it on the chin the other day because I had done all that, you know, and it's kind of like, what are you going to do with it, you know, this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've reached a point where I understand certain things that, okay, I'm going to suffer for this.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the long haul, and in the end, it will be something we'll look back and say, she'll look back and say, that was a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, rentals, for example.
Mm-hmm.
She hated rentals, you know. But now we can look back and say, you know.
Yeah, it was the right thing to do. Yeah, because you can't just be passive and not do what you know is right.
Right.
Right. So, like, what do you think the balance is there?
The balance is to forget about self, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, I've been giving a little book to people. I need to give you the book by Tim Keller, and it says The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And the main problem I've had in my life is I'm always conscious of myself.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about myself. How I can be humble, and his point is no. True humility is not even think about yourself, you know. You know, when you go in the room, who are you thinking about? Are you thinking about yourself?
How I look.
Yeah, that's right, you know. So, I mean, that has been a recent thing, is that reading that sermon by Tim Keller. Mm. It's the freedom of self-forgetfulness. And I give it to everyone who claims to be a Christian when they come to buy something. If they're not, if they don't claim to be a Christian, I give them some other tract, but I give that to them.
Yeah, well, I think that pretty much brings us up to date. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No.
Thank you for doing this.
That's great.
Taking this time out of your day.
I'm sorry I talk so much.
No, this is exactly what I feel like I've learned so much. So I really appreciate it, and hopefully straightened out all the misinformation.
Yeah. Well, you'll find out that half of what I said was factual things.
It's everybody has their own truth, right?
Yeah. You know, your dad's family, the Mennonite side, they're very much into facts and dates and that sort of stuff. They're just incredible, you know. Mm-hmm. And our family is not good at that at all.
Yeah.
You know, we take a little happening and make it a principal thing, you know.
Fable. Yeah. Person's fables. Yeah.
So if you want really information, talk to your dad, because he'll know the date. He'll know the.
Well, I also get the sense that the Persson family, Persson Peters family, in general, we do not reflect much on the past. We're not. I think there's some families that they have pictures of the past on their wall, and they think about, when we went here, we did this, and how fun that was.
Yeah.
And I think in general, our family as a whole is more, what are we going to do next?
Right.
Kind of, we don't care about what happened. Like, who cares about that? We want to know what we're going to, when are we going to play soccer next, or what are we going to do for Thanksgiving? And I think there's, I find it annoying when people are always reflecting on their history, but I think there is a good sense of knowing where we came from. I don't know if you can speak to that at all, but
yeah, I think that, you know, I remember I watched a movie one time on the Civil War, and there was this one general, I think it was at Gettysburg, when one general who was in charge of the cavalry, and he was going around doing his own thing, you know, and basically really hurt the Southern forces. And so Robert E. Lee calls him in, you know, and he says, listen, he said, you know, where were you? And you know, he kind of made excuses and stuff like that. And he was morose. He was like, oh boy, I really blew it, you know, and that sort of thing. And basically Lee said, listen, we don't have time for being sorry. Mm-hmm. We got a job to do, you know. And I think that's a good way to look at life, is to, complete and instant repentance, but That's it.
Yeah.
Let's go on to it.
Yeah.
It's time to do something.
Yeah, there seems to be a danger in dwelling
Mhm.
on things.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to forget people or forget incidences,
Yeah.
but I think there can be a danger in dwelling on something and having that rule your life.
Yeah.
You kind of see that a lot when we lose somebody we love, right?
Yeah.
The temptation can be to dwell on them because we think if we forget them, we don't love them anymore, or
Right.
we didn't love them.
That's a good way to put it. So maybe looking in the past simply is a way to know how to move to the future. I mean, I think that's it. Sentimentality has to go. I mean, sentimentality doesn't accomplish anything.
Mm-hmm. I think unless it fuels, I think it can fuel good things though. For example, if you knew, hey, I lost this person in my life, and I have an option of just kind of sulking selfishly that I lost a friend, or I can think about what they know now and how they would want me to live, and how that sentiment can kind of fuel you to, hey, I lost this person, and it can fuel you to live in a new way, with kind of a new energy, with their loss in mind and how they impacted you and how would they want you to live. But then I think that just fuels what you're doing now.
Right.
It's less reflection.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyways, I think that's what I have. I don't know.
Well, thank you. No,
Thanks for sitting down.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up. They always get mad at me because I don't edit this stuff. But let me deal with it. So, I think that one.
That's yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have read one. Let's go down and eat breakfast. Huh?
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.